Kirby, we appreciate that. But this is one of my bosses here, so he's going to have the last word. Mike Finnegar is the president of the American Civil Liberties Union of Florida, and he has a few words to say to us, and then I'd like to close.
He never had the few.
Actually, I'm going to come up in front a little bit. I'm never at a loss for words. I want you to know that it's strictly accidental that the ACLU representatives are standing on the left of the panel. It's very important to recognize that as we go along. You know, we've gone a long way with the First Amendment from Congress shall make no law. We all understand that. There are time, place, and manner restrictions all function in some way to go ahead and limit the freedom of expression. And sometimes that freedom of expression needs to be limited. But governments tend to be overly sensitive in many cases and come down too often on the side of public safety and public health. And sometimes speech gets restricted simply because the law allows them to do it. And I think that's the thing that's really important to recognize. We don't really want to endow police officials and others in the city with too much discretion in the control of the exercise of the free amendment by the citizens who come here to protest or by the Republicans who come here to nominate a president. There are a lot of problems with this. I think the city has gone a long way toward getting a good first shot at an ordinance, but the 60-minute thing really has many problems with it. There's no provision for sequential permitting. There's no provision for protesters to have assembly areas from which they would move to either the parade area, the park area, or the public viewing area. There is no provision for transportation corridors to move those people between the areas, simply because that's going to look awfully like a parade and it won't have a permit. There are lots of issues like this that need to be done. The banner provisions that John and I talked about, are they really necessary if you want to go ahead and do that? The size of the clean zone and the incorporation of neighborhoods, black and otherwise, is a problem. There's a psychological problem that I see, and I think Kirby and I talked about that earlier, and that is part of the reason for the 60-minute provision is that the police envision that they're going to be dressed in heavy gear. I spent 30 years in the Army, and I have a lot of experience being in heavy gear, and it's very hard to do in August. The problem with it is the psychology, both on the from the standpoint of the police and from the standpoint of the demonstrator. Because someone that looks like officer friendly is not going to be viewed as nearly as threatening as somebody who is standing there in a SWAT uniform waiting for something to happen. The guy in the SWAT uniform, on the other hand, is really looking for something to happen because he's wearing this gear because he anticipates that something is going to be a problem. And so all of that psychology kind of needs to be addressed. There is a great movie out. For those of you who don't know, I'm a retired Army colonel. I spent 30 years doing this kind of stuff. There is an interesting thing. The second whereas of the ordinance talks about images of Tampa and how many there are likely to be as a result of this convention. What we don't want to do is to have the kind of images of Tampa that we had in 2004 in New York City, that we had in 2008 in Minneapolis, St. Paul, or out in Denver. Those images are not nice. And for any of the city officials, and I thank all of you for being here, and for Jim and the people from his office, and from the police and things like that, I really thank you for being here to hear all of this and to help us get the consciousness raised. But there's a movie called The After Party that was put together by one of the demonstrators in New York in 2004. He's been actually a client of the American Civil Liberties Union because he got busted while he was trying to make his movie. And it really kind of gives you an idea of what kind of images the city can have if we get this wrong. And I don't want us to get this wrong. I want everybody to have the right to free speech. I want everybody to have the right to nominate their candidate for president and to go home happy, and hopefully that Julianne will have nothing to do during this week, which I strongly doubt. I would make a couple of comments. The first comment I would make is that I've always had respect for the PD's office in this town, and I think now all of us have good reason to have respect for it too. I have great respect for Jim Shimberg and the people who work for the city. I think it took a certain amount of guts to come in here today and basically appear before this audience who are likely to be skeptics. Kirby, I'll add you to that, and others that are here too, to know. I'm really happy that the city council people were here to hear firsthand a lot of the concerns about this ordinance and so forth. So I want to thank everybody. And mostly I want to thank 170 of you who thought enough that this is important enough, that your First Amendment rights were important enough to come and attend this meeting, to get a dialogue started between the city, the police, the ACLU, the demonstrating groups, and everybody else that's going to be concerned, because I think that's important. I'd like to thank the student chapter of the American Constitution Society from Stetson Law School and the Poynter Institute for co-sponsoring this event with the American Civil Liberties Union. I would caution you that there are a couple things you should remember if you're going to be demonstrators. The first thing is, if you come into a confrontation with a member of the police, I hope you will have a copy of the ACLU's bus card handy, because it gives you good advice in dealing with the law enforcement should you have an unwanted confrontation with a member of the law enforcement industry. I think it's also important to recognize that you can ask a couple questions that would be really useful. One, am I free to go? Because that will determine whether you're in a custodial situation. And the second thing, that if you said, am I free to go, and someone says no, the next thing that should be happening is that they should be reading you your Miranda rights, okay? At that point in time, when someone tells you that you have the right to remain silent, it would be a good idea to actually do that. And to keep doing it. The other thing is that if someone just casually walks up and says, will you consent to a search? The answer is no. Unless you're in a custodial situation and you've been placed in a custodial situation. In that case, they have a right to search you. But if someone just casually asks for that, say no. So get the ACLU's materials, because they'll give you good guidance in what to do and how to be a responsible demonstrator. And remember, there is no protection if you actually break a law. You might actually end up in the pokey as a result of all that, and that's not good. And finally, I would recommend the fact that the ACLU always needs new members. Okay, you can join for about 20 bucks. And we would love to have all of you that aren't members of the ACLU join us, because we're going to have a lot of work to do along with all of these people that are here and along with many of you, and I think that's very important. So I want to thank all of you for participating tonight, for everybody who put this on, Joyce Hamilton, Henry, and the members of the staff. All of those folks have done a great deal of work. And I really think that it's amazing that we had this many people come and stay this long on a Tuesday night, on a hot day, to say that the First Amendment stays important in the United States, and to remember that it starts, Congress shall make no law. Okay? And that's really kind of nice. I tend to be kind of absolutist about that sort of thing, but the courts have long since abandoned that approach. So thank you very much. John, you have
And the last thing I'd like to say is, again, thank you for coming tonight, and let's have a big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you. Have a good evening, and be safe.